Hi guys, Jacob at Jaegers. Today we're getting into the Tippmann Cronus, taking it apart, and doing some basic maintenance and troubleshooting. Before you start working on the Cronus at all, always be sure that your gas system's detached, no gas in the gun, and you're going to have this decocked. Otherwise, when you open it up, things are going to fly everywhere. Today we're going to work out of the actual parts kit that comes with a Cronus. Got the barrel bag, which you're already going to be using, the barrel cleaner, and then what we're going to have for tools is the 3 hex keys. And we're going to use the packet of oil that comes with as well. We get a lot of questions about this O-ring that's included. This is an extra O-ring for your tank. If you ever have a tiny leak coming out of this little pinhole on the bottom of the ASA, you need to change this O-ring on the top of your tank. It's not for putting around your barrel or for dropping inside the ASA to try and make it seal on your tank. It's just a tank O-ring. Don't use it for anything else. First step is going to be get some of these cosmetic bits off the foregrip, sights, and obviously the barrel. Use the 1/8 Allen key for pretty much everything we're doing today. Something we've seen some people do that's really cool is you can take these rails off the sides of the Cronus. It's just these 3 screws. If you do decide to take these off, be sure that you don't put the screws back in the side of the gun without the rail on there. If you put the screws in without the rail underneath to provide the right height for them, the screws will dent the body on the inside and prevent the marker from operating correctly. You will essentially ruin your gun. So, rails off, that's cool if you want to do it, but be sure to put the screws and the rails in a plastic bag somewhere and not back on the gun. You don't have to take these off to take the gun apart. I'm just going to do that one to kind of show you guys, but if you're just opening the gun and you want to leave the rail on there, don't take it off. You just leave it on there. It's not a big deal. One tool you're going to need that's not included in the Cronus spares bag is a Phillips head screwdriver or a crosshead screwdriver, about medium in size. There is one hidden Phillips head screw on the passenger side of the gun. You'll have to take that out, and I have to take that out before we start taking all of their screws out. This is a self-tapping screw, so if you're putting it back in, don't torque it down too much because eventually you will pull the threads out of the body. You don't really need this screw for the gun to operate safely, but it's nice to have everything complete and not stripped out, so don't put it back in with too much force. You'll need to remove the rubber end cap that covers the stock adapter. If you decide to mount a stock to the back of the Cronus, it should slide on there and bolt in with one screw. There are some stocks out there that require you to take the whole thing apart and replace the back cap, which we'll go over once we get the whole thing apart. You also need to take off the little rubber cap that's covering the cocking knob here. Sometimes those are difficult, but a little bit of effort, you can pull that guy right off. You don't have to put him back on if you don't want to. I think it feels nice to have the rubber on there. It's up to you guys. The next step is going to be pulling out all of these 1/8 hex head body screws. You don't have to take out the velocity adjustment screw. You don't need to do the feed neck screw. Once you've pulled that Phillips head off the backside, it's just all the ones that are uniform and visible here. These are different lengths, so as we pull them out, we're going to put them into sorted piles. That way you don't get confused for the reassembly. All right, so the longest screw is this one, and this one takes quite a bit to unthread because it actually holds the ASA in place. So we're going to set that one aside there. We already pulled the one screw out of right up here, but we're going to put all the ones that are that length in a pile right here at the top. And that's going to be these top 4 screws and the bottom 2 along this rail here. I should be able to just pull them out quick. I thought I had these unthreaded further. All right. Sometimes those threads get hung up on the plastic body itself. We'll fish that back out in a sec. And those 3 for the middle of the body, the part just below the back cap, and right above the trigger mechanism are all going to be the same length. I actually think they might be the same. Yeah, they're all the same as the ASA ones, so you can get those put together. There's only 2 different lengths of screws for the body screws, but keep them separated. It's going to save you a big headache later. Once you've got all that apart, again, it doesn't hurt to double check that everything is decocked, hammer in the forward position. It's time to just open it up. You're going to want to go slow. I kind of like to put my thumb in the back cap and pull up there, and then kind of do the same thing up here in the front. Break the 2 ends kind of free and slowly lift. So right now what's happening is the safety is what's caught. We can push on that, and that's going to let us lift the last little bit. And we're also caught on the barrel adapter here on the front, so push down on that. And it's not going to cooperate for this part of the video. There we go. It's plastic, it's a little bit flexible. You just want to be sure you peel that off slowly, otherwise some springs in here can go flying. We're going to set this guy aside for now. Once you're inside here, everything's visible. The first thing I do is remove this back cap because that's got the most spring tension. This is a buffer O-ring. It's free floating, it just kind of floats there. It's not loose from somewhere. Just set that aside, spring and spring guide and back cap. Like we were talking about, a lot of the stocks on the market are going to require that you replace this piece. So if you're just here to put a stock in, you'd put the O-ring with the spring through it in the back of your hammer. Just put the new one of these on to put the whole thing back together. But we're here to take a little more apart than that. After that, the linkage arm comes out of the top, and that separates your rear bolt, or we call them hammers, but they're called rear bolts, out of the back, and the front bolt up here. The rear bolt comes apart into 3 pieces. You've got your cocking knob with a hole in it. You have to make sure that's aligned towards the back to put the spring in. And then there's an insert in here. You don't ever need to replace this part, but that right there. The barrel adapter, just kind of pull the front bolt back and lift that out. Ball detent, front bolt, and then we're going to pull the trigger mechanism out. All the pins in the trigger mechanism are the same, except there's a black one. That's a tougher metal, and that's what the sear itself rides on back here. Black part, black pin. It's the rearmost pin in the gun. These little springs can go flying. You can get the 2 of these interchanged between the trigger spring and the sear spring. They're the same, but you want to be careful when pulling on these because they can go flying. You got a smaller linkage arm between your trigger and the rear mechanism. Spring, trigger, safety, and then all these pins are the same. Taking out the ASA, airline, and power tube is pretty easy at this point. Just kind of lift on the ASA. These are just slip fittings. These just slide into here, and there's O-rings. If you're taking your Cronus apart for a leak, there's really only 3 places the leak can come from. That's going to be the internal ASA O-ring in here. You've got another one of those right in here on the power tube. Or it could actually be the O-rings or seal in your valve. We're not going to go over taking the valve actually apart. That's a little bit on the complex side. If you have a leak coming out of the valve, which you can diagnose by it'll be audible coming down the barrel, as opposed to just sounding like it's inside the body somewhere. If that's the case, you want to contact a Tippmann Service Center, or we might do another video on Tippmann valves in general, how to take this apart. I wouldn't recommend it to most people. It's a little on the tough side, but we'll cover that at a later date. If you do need to take the power tube out of the body, there are these 2 bolts on the back side that hold it in place. These are different from anything else on the rest of the gun. They're a short with a button head, short thread with a button head. Now the power tube just lifts out, and that's about as far as you can take this apart. The O-ring in here is the exact same as the one that we looked at in the ASA. It's just a size 10 O-ring from any standard paintball store can help you out with that. If they've gone bad and you've got a leak, you can usually visually see. These O-rings tend to extrude and start to separate when they go bad. So you can look in there and see if it's messed up, and that'll tell you right away if that's where your leak's at. We're going to put this whole thing back together now. Show you guys a few of the easier tricks for doing that. First thing, power tube, slide that back in the body and put these 2 screws back in. With any paintball screws, guys, you don't want to over torque these things. You're going to risk rounding the heads out. I recommend put the longer side of the Allen key down, use the short side for leverage, and just twist till it stops. Don't force it any further. Don't be putting the short end and using the long end for more leverage. That's going to risk you rounding the heads out on all your screws. It's worth noting you can take the trigger guard out. That obviously just sits in there. And there is a small piece down here. I think Tippmann originally was going to release a double trigger kit for this and make a guard that connected down here instead of up there, and this just fills that space in the body. So if you have this little piece sitting around, you're not sure what it's from, you don't know where it goes in the gun, it just goes down here. The extra bits go in the back, and that answers someone's question at some point, hopefully. The sharper bend side of the airline is what goes in the top. It's easiest just to slide that in like so, and then rotate it into place. And we're actually going to unrotate it halfway back there to take your ASA, slide that on, and do that. Trigger pins or trigger mechanism pins, all the same, except for the black one that goes at the rearward position. This, I don't know what we'd call it, kind of middle trigger. You got your main trigger and it makes this one operate. You got the side with 2 holes, goes towards the top, and that fits over these 2 pins. Then trigger and the linkage arm. I recommend putting that in before you put the springs in, because you actually have to pull the trigger back a tiny bit in order for this to be long enough to reach. You don't want to do that with the spring in there and the gun take it apart. It will go flying, you'll lose it. And we'll drop these springs in. Just snap it in, do the top, and then kind of push the bottom in. Safety, the red side is going to go up towards us. And go ahead and put the front bolt in now. Ball detent needs to be facing this way. It should be kind of lifting toward the back. And if you put it in and move the front bolt, you'll see it just folds down when the gun fires. You don't want to put it in backward. That's going to scoop and catch, and nothing's going to work right, and you're going to ruin it. So just be sure that's facing the right direction. The barrel adapter. There is an O-ring inside this. That doesn't need replaced ever. It shouldn't ever go bad. It's just there to provide friction on your barrel and to keep it from unscrewing when you fire. It's not going to leak or anything crazy. It's not an O-ring that needs replaced. The adapter has kind of a hole halfway drilled into this side, and it's solid on this side. The solid side goes down. The hole facing side has to face up. Otherwise, it won't go back together right. Do the rear bolt. Drop in this guy. And the linkage arm. It's going to require that you push this all the way forward. Attach it to there. Floating O-ring in the back. Anywhere you want to put that. If this doesn't want to go in, be sure this is rotated correctly. If it's off, this won't go in. You have to rotate till the hole lines up. It'll all assemble like that. The threaded portion of this faces down towards the ASA. It won't let you put this together wrong. There's a notch at the top that has to go in. Otherwise, it won't all snap back together. At this point, it's time to put the top half back on the body. Be sure everything's sitting in right. I had the detent come loose there, so detent sitting, spring sitting in there. Double check everything's present. Make sure you didn't forget your safety or one of the pins. If you have leftover parts, now's the time to figure out where they go. Setting the top half back on here. Should line up pretty easy. Just give it a little push. And it all sits on there nicely. If something's not going in, be sure it's all lined up. Right now my safety is what's fighting me. I just give the safety a little push from the back side and not let everything glide together without resistance. Start putting screws back in. All right, before you reattach the sights, or if you took the rails off and put those on, or the front grip, now's a good time to check the functionality of the Cronus. Rack it back, safety off. It should decock, and there's not much else to it. We're going to go over actually lubing it here in a sec. Yeah, we'll put these back on later. For the Cronus, to actually lubricate it, take the little packet of oil it came with. This is more oil than you're going to need to lubricate it, but all you do is put a couple drops down here in the ASA. Hope it's not too close to the camera, but just like 5-10 drops in there. Then you'll screw a tank onto the Cronus and dry fire it in a safe direction. That oil is going to be worked through the system. It's going to lubricate your valve O-rings, your hammer. Everything in there will be lubricated by that little mist of oil that gets blasted through there with the high pressure gas. You don't have to take it apart to oil it or get in there and oil each O-ring. That's all you have to do on the Cronus for maintenance, besides wiping it down and cleaning the barrel out. While we're on that, Cronuses do have an A5 thread, but not every A5 barrel will fit the Cronus because of this adapter that lets you attach the mock suppressor if you have the tactical edition or if you buy the tactical upgrade kit for the Cronus. The custom products barrels do fit. There might be an older version of these that doesn't, but custom products has made their barrels slimmer. That way they do slide inside there and thread on to the Cronus without any issue. A really good barrel that we know of that does not fit is going to be the Empire Driver X. These are great A5 barrels, but you see how it gets wider right there? That's going to cause it not to fit in there. The Cronus doesn't take all A5 barrels. Not universally compatible. I don't believe Freak barrels fit on this because of that, and there's probably a slew of aftermarket barrels that are not Cronus compatible. So that's something to keep in mind. We know that the custom products barrels fit. Those are phenomenal, affordable barrels. I highly recommend them for Cronuses. But if you're looking for a different barrel, you might want to double check and see if it's going to be Cronus compatible due to how thick it is. All right, we realized we forgot that nice little pesky Phillips head screw on the back side. We'll put that on. Again, don't thread stuff too tight. You'll pull the threads out. But there we are. And there we are, guys. That is Cronus disassembly, maintenance, reassembly. A few little tips and tricks for you. If you have any questions, please hit us up on Facebook or throw it in the comments down below. We're always happy to help you guys out, and hopefully you learned something in the video. Thank you again, guys.